Well, when I'm good, I'm very good. But when I'm bad, I'm better.
The Brooklyn Beginnings. Mae West's journey began in a rough-and-tumble area of Brooklyn, where daily life was equal parts lively chaos and endless possibility. Her father, known to locals as Battling Jack West, owned a livery stable and made extra cash fighting in bare-knuckle brawls. Growing up surrounded by strong personalities, young Mae quickly learned how to make herself heard. Her mother, Matilda, was a former corset model determined to steer her daughter toward the stage. Even before she could read, Mae was already watching street performers, fascinated by the way they commanded attention and applause. Some say that's where she picked up the seed of her signature confidence. She saw that with the right spark, a performer could sway an entire crowd. When Mae turned 5, her parents signed her up for amateur talent shows. While most kids flinched under the spotlight, Mae thrived on it. She'd sing cheeky songs, tell jokes, or perform little skits, whatever it took to make people laugh. Observers were stunned at how such a tiny girl could exude so much presence. Over time, she started working small vaudeville gigs under her mother's watchful eye. Vaudeville was a demanding circuit with no shortage of bigger acts, but Mae refused to blend in. She watched burlesque dancers for tips on stage presence and comedic timing, realizing she could amplify her own routines by adding a playful, flirtatious twist. Soon, local showrunners started calling her Baby Mae, an up-and-comer who was unafraid to break a few boundaries if it meant bigger laughs. That Brooklyn grit would remain with her forever, shaping the sassy, streetwise undertone of her persona, even when she climbed to the top of Hollywood's glittering ladder. The play that sent her to jail, Mae West, was never one to shy away from controversy, but even her friends were stunned when she unveiled sex in 1926. Fed up with being given passive roles and predictable scripts, she wrote the play herself under a pseudonym, determined to tell a story from a bold new angle. Unsurprisingly, every major newspaper refused to print advertisements using that scandalous 3-letter title. SEX was simply too provocative for polite society. Yet word traveled fast by mouth, and the play soon drew curious New Yorkers who wanted to see just how outrageous it could be. Inside the theater, Mae played a brassy character who was refreshingly frank about her desires and experiences. The content was considered shocking at the time, featuring innuendo and flirtations that broke the era's strict moral codes. Audiences packed the seats anyway, and the show sold tickets like hotcakes. The city's moral authorities, however, were far from amused. Sensing that the production was crossing an invisible line, the police raided the theater mid-performance. Mae and the cast were hauled downtown in a flurry of camera flashes and outraged headlines. Sentenced to 10 days on what was then Governor's Island, Mae's prison stay was more like an extended press conference. The warden and his wife reportedly fawned over her, often inviting her out to dinner. When she was released after just 8 days for good behavior, she cheerfully waved at reporters and declared the whole experience to be a fine publicity stunt. The aftermath only heightened her fame. If anything, critics' condemnations made the public even more intrigued by a woman willing to defy social norms. Mae walked away triumphant, learning a crucial lesson she would use throughout her career. Scandal could be converted into stardom if managed with wit and unbreakable confidence. Conquering Paramount. By the early 1930s, the film industry was on the hunt for fresh stars who could speak as well as they moved. Silent-era icons struggled to adapt to the talkies, and studios were losing money fast. Enter Mae West, who had already built a reputation as a playwright, comedic actress, and self-made brand in New York. Paramount Pictures initially offered her a small, supporting role. But when she saw the script, She boldly told studio executives she could write something sharper herself. They gave her a shot, perhaps not realizing how revolutionary that decision would be. Once Mae unleashed her wit on screen, Paramount executives realized they'd discovered a gold mine. Audiences were entranced by her slow, suggestive drawl and the way she seemed to command attention with the smallest motion of her hips. Her comedic timing, honed on the tough vaudeville circuit, translated flawlessly to film. She soon insisted on having final approval over her own lines, costumes, and even co-stars. That's how she stumbled upon an underused contract player named Cary Grant. While nobody else saw his star potential, Mae sized him up and announced, "If he can talk, I'll take him." Their first film together, She Done Him Wrong, was a massive hit that kept Paramount's doors open during a perilous financial stretch.
What kind of husband does you think I should get?
I should take a single man, leave the husbands alone.
Mae's success at Paramount wasn't just measured in box office numbers. She became a tastemaker and a trusted source of entertainment at a time when the country was mired in the Great Depression. Moviegoers wanted escapism, and Mae offered a fantasy world where a witty, self-assured woman could charm and outmaneuver every obstacle in her path. As she raked in profits for the studio, she negotiated unprecedented contracts that gave her creative freedom. In an era when women's voices were often silenced, Mae West not only had a seat at the table, she took the head chair and orchestrated the entire production to suit her style. Battling the censors. As Mae West's film career gained momentum, she quickly found herself squaring off against the newly enforced Hays Code, the strict moral guidelines that policed Hollywood's content in the 1930s. The code forbade explicit mentions of adult themes, aiming to keep corrupting influences off American screens. Naturally, Mae's irreverent humor and flirtatious characters landed her right in the crosshairs. Rather than tone down her act, she got clever. If they nixed one suggestive line, she'd replace it with a double entendre that was just as daring, only hidden behind wordplay.
I am delighted. I have heard so much about you.
Yeah, but you can't prove.
Audiences ate it up. Part of the thrill of watching a Mae West movie was listening for the coded jokes that snuck past censors. Her dialogue dripped with innuendo, so subtle that the moral guardians had trouble pinning it down. A simple glance or an offhand remark could leave viewers blushing and grinning at the same time. This tug-of-war elevated her popularity. Rumors spread that each new film she released was even more shocking than the last, driving curiosity and ticket sales through the roof. To push back against her influence, some critics and religious groups demanded complete bans of her movies, arguing that her on-screen persona glorified promiscuity. Mae, never one to back down, countered that she wasn't forcing anyone to see her films. If the audience wanted her brand of humor and confidence, she would deliver, while staying just barely within the boundaries the censors imposed. This cat-and-mouse game only reinforced her role as a cultural rebel. To many, she symbolized personal freedom and the right to express oneself without fear of condemnation. By the time the Hays Code tightened its grip even further, Mae's star power was already unstoppable. She proved that wit, charisma, and a strategic understanding of what censors hated most could outsmart even the most rigid rulebook. The Mae West persona. Decades before social media made personal branding a buzzword, Mae West was already a master of creating and controlling her public image. She was famously petite, standing around 5 feet tall, yet she wore sky-high heels and styled her blonde hair to add a few more inches of presence. She had dressmakers incorporate cunning seams into her gowns, shaping them to exaggerate her curves until she resembled a living hourglass. This theatrical approach extended to everything she did. From her walk, to her trademark one-liners. When Mae glided across a movie set, every step felt like a calculated performance. She could shift the atmosphere in a single glance, turning an innocent question into a flirtatious offer. Costume designers loved her because she embraced the glitz and glamour of show business, piling on faux diamonds and fluffy feather boas that amplified her dazzling aura. Photographers, on the other hand, learned never to release a picture without her seal of approval. She had final say on lighting, camera angles, anything that could affect how she appeared in print. Yet, behind that high-voltage persona was a surprisingly private individual. She lived for decades in the Ravenswood apartment complex, a building that became synonymous with her name. Reportedly, the walls were painted white and gold, with plenty of mirrors everywhere, perfect for an actress who was constantly refining her image. Off-screen, Mae didn't party late into the night or chain-smoke cigarettes. In fact, she was more inclined to wrap herself in a silk robe and go to bed early, so she could be at her best when the cameras rolled. She presented herself as a woman who knew how to revel in glamour without letting it consume her. This careful boundary between her public and private lives became the foundation of the Mae West legend. A woman who could strut into any room, steal every eye, and vanish just as easily into her own carefully guarded sanctuary. Reinventing herself. When World War II reshaped Hollywood's priorities in the early 1940s, the public's taste for cheeky innuendo also began to shift. The Hays Code grew stricter, and younger pin-up stars like Betty Grable and Rita Hayworth introduced a sunnier vision of sex appeal that contrasted Mae's sharp, knowing wit. Rather than disappear, Mae pivoted. She revived her most iconic stage production, Diamond Lil, for new audiences. Eventually, she went beyond the stage to create a Las Vegas nightclub act that surrounded her with brawny bodybuilders, a spectacle that combined her flair for comedy with a hint of the outrageous. Nightclub crowds, often hungry for adult humor, were delighted to see Mae in person, dishing out her famous one-liners. She would stroll across the stage draped in sequins, often flanked by half a dozen muscular men who flexed for the audience's amusement. Mae would quip about love, relationships, and the male physique, leaving everyone roaring with laughter. Some critics dismissed it as campy or outdated, but fans saw it as a remarkable reinvention. An older star who refused to soften her style just to please changing norms. Her occasional film comebacks in the 1970s, like Myra Breckinridge and Sextet, were met with mixed reviews. Some found her insistence on playing a sultry siren well into her 70s unconvincing. But Mae never wavered. She demanded the same glamorous lighting, insisted on rewrites if the script strayed from her comedic sensibilities, and continued to cast younger men as her would-be suitors. At a time when Hollywood often discarded its aging female stars, she carved out her own path. Even in the face of criticism, she stayed true to the persona she had spent a lifetime perfecting. Reinvention for Mae West wasn't about becoming someone else. It was about staying relevant on her own terms, with the same trademark sass and unwavering self-confidence that had first made her a star. The quiet side of a legend. While Mae West's on-screen personality was all diamond-studded swagger, her private life could be surprisingly quiet. She was a staunch believer in holistic living, rarely drinking or smoking, and preferring simple meals over wild Hollywood banquets. She was also deeply spiritual. Close friends recalled her fascination with psychics, seances, and ideas about guardian spirits. In her mind, there was more to life than just what the cameras could capture, and she often sought guidance or affirmation from otherworldly sources. In her beloved Ravenswood apartment, she created a haven that felt like a cross between a palace and an artist's atelier. White carpets, gilded furniture, and mirrors on every wall gave the impression of walking into a timeless Hollywood fantasy. Mae would spend hours reading scripts or brainstorming quips for her next performance, all the while keeping a phone nearby in case a friend or business associate called. She was known for her generosity, especially to the people she trusted, sometimes helping them out financially if they hit a rough patch. Despite her warmth in private, Mae could be fiercely guarded. She preferred to keep her circle small, carefully selecting confidants who wouldn't leak her personal affairs to the press. She believed that stars destroyed their own mystique by becoming too ordinary in the public eye. That's likely why she rarely made casual appearances around town. No big supermarket trips or strolls along Hollywood Boulevard. If she did appear, it was usually in her chauffeured Cadillac, gliding up to a premiere or a dinner event like a queen on a chariot. Even her romantic life was shrouded in secrecy. She had companions, sometimes much younger men who admired her strength, but she seldom spoke about the details. All of this nurtured an aura of mystery. For someone who projected such boldness on screen, she kept an equally strong fortress around her private soul.
Aren't you forgetting that you're married?
I'm doing my best. What's the good of resisting temptation? There'll always be...
The final bow. By the time Mae West reached her final act, she had already redefined what it meant to be a Hollywood legend. Though she only starred in 11 major films, her impact on pop culture was immeasurable. She demonstrated that a woman could wield her sexuality and humor as tools for empowerment, not just window dressing for male leads. Stars like Marilyn Monroe and Madonna would later credit her unapologetic attitude for blazing new trails in self-expression. Wherever her name was mentioned, it conjured images of wit, glamour, and a refusal to be constrained by social norms. But her legacy wasn't just about sex appeal. Mae was a master at controlling her destiny in a business notorious for exploiting female talent. She wrote her own scripts when she disliked studio offerings, battled censors with clever innuendo, and refused to take no for an answer. Even as she aged, she bent rules and expectations to suit her vision. Some found it comical that she continued to play sultry temptresses well into her 70s, but she viewed it as her right to decide how she was portrayed. In an industry that often discards older women, Mae West's enduring stardom was almost an act of rebellion. When she passed away in 1980, Hollywood paused to reflect on a woman who had used laughter and seduction to challenge the status quo. Many recalled her pointed phrases, "It's not the men in your life that count, it's the life in your men," or the infamous, "Come up and see me sometime." Decades later, those lines are still quoted, parodied, and admired. The world remembered her as someone who embraced the spotlight on her own terms, fearlessly and defiantly. By the time the curtain fell, it was clear she had left behind more than just films. She left an entire playbook on how to captivate the world by simply being unapologetically yourself. It's rare to find someone who builds an empire on wit, nerve, and a dash of scandal. But Mae West did all that and more. Her story goes beyond shimmering costumes and cheeky one-liners. It's a testament to fearless self-invention. Wherever Hollywood heads next, Mae's legacy, a bold challenge to convention, keeps drawing us back, reminding everyone that a clever tongue and unshakable confidence can spark cultural revolutions. Maybe that's why, even decades later, we're still captivated by the woman who dared to blur the lines between laughter and seduction. If you enjoyed this glimpse into Mae West's extraordinary life, don't forget to like this video and subscribe. You'll get more fascinating stories from Hollywood's golden age and beyond. So hit that bell icon too, and never miss an update. Thanks for watching.